My sister mocked my miscarriage at her baby shower, saying I'm worthless, and bragged about giving our parents grandchildren first. But little did she know, I was 2 steps ahead of her, and when she opened my gift, now everyone thinks I'm evil because I broke up a family? I'm Amy, 29 female, and I have a sister, Addison, 22 female. We've never been super close, probably because of our age difference. Growing up with Addison was always interesting. We had a tricky relationship. Since there was a 7-year age gap between us, it felt like a huge difference when we were kids. Addison always needed to be the star of the show. Even when she was little, she had a way of grabbing everyone's attention. Whether we were with family, at school events, or just hanging out at home, I don't think she meant to do it on purpose. It was just part of who she was. She's got this bubbly, outgoing personality that attracts people, while I was always happier watching and listening. I remember so many times when Addison totally stole the show without even meaning to. I was at home performing a new song I had learned on my piano, and right in the middle, she decided it was the perfect time to show off her cartwheels in the front row. Everyone stopped watching me to cheer her. In high school, I was so excited to finally make the soccer team. But the same day, Addison got the lead role in the school play. All anyone could talk about was her. Even though she sometimes made me feel forgotten, I never got mad at her. She's my little sister, and how could I not love her? I couldn't help but feel impressed by how confident she was, even if it made me feel a little less special sometimes. She was always so excited about everything, and that energy was contagious. Eventually, we both grew up and started living our different lives. I met Charles, 32 male, on a dating app. We clicked right away. He was so funny and easy to talk to. It felt like we'd been friends for ages. Dating Charles was so much fun. We went on adventures like surprise road trips, but we also loved cozy nights just watching movies. No matter what we did, every moment felt magical. He was always there for me, cheering me on, listening when I needed to talk, and helping me through the tough times. When Charles proposed, it was the most amazing moment. He planned a picnic at our favorite spot, with a view of the whole city. At sunset, he got down on one knee. I didn't even let him finish asking before I said yes. We kissed and the sun went down. It felt like the perfect start to our forever. Our wedding day was perfect. We got married in a beautiful little church with our closest friends and family there to celebrate. Charles' smile was the brightest thing in the room as we said our vows. The whole day was full of love, joy, and the promise of a happy future. Our first dance as husband and wife was amazing. I felt like I was the luckiest woman alive. Charles is my dream come true, and I couldn't believe how happy I was. But even with all our happiness, something was bothering me. On our wedding day, Addison's boyfriend Matthew, 25 male, proposed to her. Of course, I was excited for my sister, but I couldn't shake this uneasy feeling. It seemed like every time something wonderful happened to me, Addison was right there doing something to take attention away from me. I didn't doubt that Addison was happy or that she loved Matthew, but something about her getting engaged at my wedding just didn't feel right. It was like she couldn't let me have my special moment without making it partly about her. I tried to ignore my feelings, telling myself it was just silly sibling stuff, but a little part of me was still worried. Later, I was talking to my best friend who was my maid of honor. She told me something that shocked me. After the wedding, she talked to Matthew and he told her that Addison wanted to get engaged on my wedding day. When my best friend said she was worried about how I would feel, Matthew said he was told that I was fine with it. The truth was, I wasn't totally okay with it. Of course, I was happy for Addison and excited that Matthew would be a part of our family. But I also felt a little angry that she chose to do this on my wedding day. Once again, it felt like she was stealing my spotlight on the most important day of my life. Even though I felt hurt, I didn't want to let it ruin my happiness. Addison is my sister, and I love her even though things are always complicated between us. If getting engaged on my wedding day made her happy, I wasn't going to stop her. Addison and Matthew got married less than a year after us. Charles and I decided right away that we wanted to start a family. We couldn't wait to have a baby to love. We were excited and hopeful as we started trying to get pregnant. We knew there might be problems, but we were ready for the challenge. Finding out I was pregnant was the most amazing feeling. It was like all my dreams were coming true. I was so happy and excited, I could hardly believe it. I couldn't wait to tell our friends and family. I'll never forget how Charles's face looked when I told him. He was overjoyed, his eyes filled with tears, and he hugged me so tight. We immediately called our parents and siblings to tell them the good news. Everyone was so happy for us. Some of them cried, while some screamed with excitement. It felt like everyone was celebrating with us. For a few weeks, everything was perfect. I started imagining our happy, healthy future with our sweet little baby. I started thinking about baby clothes, painting a nursery, and all the fun things new parents get to do. I loved looking at baby names and daydreaming about what our child might be like. Those were some of the happiest weeks of my life. It felt like our happiness was stolen from us. The miscarriage was so unexpected and painful. I was overwhelmed with sadness and loss. Charles was so strong for me during that horrible time. His love and support helped me get through the worst of it. Telling our family and friends about the miscarriage was so difficult. I could see the pain on their faces, and it broke my heart that they were hurting too. I felt like I had let them down. Their disappointment and sadness made me feel even worse. I felt guilty and heartbroken, and it was so hard to find the strength to go on. In those first few weeks, it seemed like everything reminded me of the baby I lost. I would cry for no reason, and sometimes I didn't want to get out of bed in the morning. Little by little, with the love of my family and the support of Charles, I started to heal. When we decided to try for a baby again, I felt both hopeful and scared. I was so afraid of having another miscarriage. The thought of going through that again was almost too much to bear. This time, we decided to keep it a secret. We didn't want to get our hopes up or deal with the disappointment of telling everyone if things didn't work out. Sadly, it seemed like fate was against us because I had a second miscarriage. It was even worse than the first one. I felt broken and hopeless. All I could do was cry and stay in bed. I couldn't believe I was going through this again. Luckily, my mom came to stay with us. Her love and support helped me as I struggled to deal with my grief and sadness. As I lay in bed, hurting both physically and emotionally, I couldn't stop asking myself why. Why did this happen to us? Why couldn't we have the family we wanted so badly? I couldn't understand. It seemed so unfair. I desperately wanted answers, but I couldn't find any. My grief seemed to grow stronger as time passed. Sometimes, the sadness felt like a weight pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. There were times when I felt like I might never be happy again. Charles did everything he could to help me, but I know this was hard for him too. Sometimes, I would see him looking at me with tears in his eyes, and it would break my heart. We had both wanted this baby so much. My mom was my lifeline during those dark days. She cooked for me, cleaned the house, and most importantly, just listened to me cry. She never told me I should get over it or try to cheer me up with empty promises. She just let me be sad. My second miscarriage was still so fresh. The pain was still so raw. Just a week later, Addison called me with news that shocked me. She was pregnant. It was a crazy mix of emotions. Of course, I was happy for her. She's my sister, and I wanted her to experience the joy of being a mom. I imagined her holding her new baby, filled with the same love and happiness that I had felt when I was pregnant. For a moment, I forgot about my own sadness and shared in her joy. But I couldn't escape the wave of sadness that washed over me. Why did this happen to me? Why couldn't I have a baby too? I felt angry and jealous, even though I knew it wasn't Addison's fault. I knew it wasn't fair to feel those things, but I couldn't help it. It was so hard to deal with my own grief while trying to be supportive and excited for my sister. That was one of the hardest times of my life. I couldn't escape the sadness I felt about losing my own baby. Watching her get so excited about her pregnancy made me miss mine even more. I felt a pang of jealousy, wishing it could be me. It was hard to hear about her plans when all I could think about was what might have been. Despite the way I felt, I pushed my sadness aside to focus on Addison and her exciting news. I didn't want to bring her down. I smiled and congratulated her, trying to hide the pain in my heart. When we hung up, all I could think about was my own mixed up feelings. In the weeks that followed, those feelings got even stronger. I had to work hard to balance my own sadness with my happiness for Addison. It wasn't easy trying to be excited for her while still grieving my own losses. But even though it was hard, I knew I would be there for my sister. I told her that I wanted to help in any way that I could. My own pain wouldn't keep me from being a good aunt and a supportive sister. As Addison got closer to her due date, the excitement about the baby grew. It was time to start planning her baby shower, and Addison asked me to do it. I was honored that she wanted me to help with something so special, but I was also a little nervous. Of course, I wanted the shower to be perfect for her, but I was still dealing with my own sadness, and that made it hard to get excited. I knew everyone would be focused on Addison and her baby. That made me feel even worse because it reminded me so much of what I had lost. It was hard, but I decided not to let my feelings get in the way of my sister's happiness. Even though it was difficult, I decided to push my feelings aside and plan the best baby shower possible for Addison. She had a clear idea of exactly how she wanted everything, down to the smallest detail. We planned the color scheme, decorations, and even what kind of food to serve. Sadly, Addison started being really mean and nasty. She would yell at me if anything wasn't perfect, but I told myself she was probably just stressed and hormonal. In the weeks before the wedding, I spent a lot of time at Addison's place. We used Pinterest for ideas and made lots of lists to keep track of everything. We spent hours choosing decorations, tasting cakes, and looking at party favors. It was important to me to make sure everything was perfect for her special day. I put all my energy into making it a day she would always remember. I couldn't wait to see her happy and excited when she saw everything we had done. The days before the baby shower flew by. We worked hard to get everything ready and make sure all the details were perfect. I had planned everything carefully, the decorations, the food, and even who to invite. I was determined to give Addison the best possible baby shower. I was excited, but also a little sad that this wasn't happening for me. Still, I pushed my feelings aside and focused on celebrating my sister and her baby. That's what was most important. 2 days before the shower, Addison asked me to come over and help decorate the baby's nursery. I was happy to help and excited to see everything come together for her. Little did I know, something was about to happen that would change my life forever. While we were working, Addison got a phone call from someone named Brody. She went into another room to talk, leaving me alone in the nursery. I didn't mean to listen, but the baby monitor was on, and I could hear every word she said. At first, I tried to ignore Addison's phone call. It was probably nothing important, but as I listened to her whispering on the phone, I started to get a bad feeling in my stomach. Something about the way she was talking made me think she was hiding something. And then I heard it, words that I'll never forget. Addison was cheating on Matthew, and the new baby wasn't his. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I felt shocked and dizzy, like the whole world was spinning. How could she do this to Matthew? He was such a kind person. He didn't deserve this. And what about the baby? My head was spinning, trying to understand what was happening. Suddenly, everything made sense. The secret phone calls, the whispering, the way she got engaged on my wedding day. I knew what I had to do, but I decided not to say anything right then. Instead, I decided to wait until after the baby shower to confront Addison about what I heard. I would get proof and then expose her lies to everyone. It was risky, but I had to do it. Addison had betrayed Matthew, and she needed to be held accountable. The morning of Addison's baby shower, everything seemed perfect. The decorations were beautiful, the food was all ready, and the guests were happy and excited. The party started, but something felt wrong. When Addison walked in, she didn't have her usual bubbly, happy smile. Instead, she looked smug and satisfied, almost like she was better than everyone else. I tried to ignore my gut feeling that something bad was going to happen, but as the afternoon went on, things got even worse. Everyone was trying to make Addison happy, but she kept finding things to complain about. She blamed me for ruining her shower, even though the things she was upset about were things she never even told me she wanted. She ran off to her room crying, but came out a few minutes later holding Matthew's hand. Suddenly, it was like Addison became a different person. In front of everyone, she started yelling at me about my miscarriages, saying mean and horrible things. She said that it must have been God's way of punishing me, that I deserved to lose my babies. I was speechless. I felt shocked and hurt, like someone had stabbed me in the heart. I wanted to yell back, to tell her how wrong she was, but I was so stunned that I couldn't even think of what to say. How could my own sister be so cruel? Had she always felt this way about me? Addison just kept going, getting meaner with every word. How could she use my pain against me? How could she be so horrible? I felt myself getting angry, but before I could say anything, she said something else that completely shattered me. I don't know how I could live without being a mom, she sneered. It would be such a sad, empty, worthless life. Luckily, I can give our parents their first grandchild, unlike some people. Everyone in the room gasped. It was clear that Addison was talking about my miscarriages and how I wasn't able to have a baby. I felt sick with hurt and disbelief. Addison's awful words hung in the air, poison in the room. I felt like I couldn't breathe. How could she be so cruel? How could she use the worst thing that ever happened to me to try to hurt me even more? The room was silent, except for a few of Addison's friends, who giggled like they thought the whole thing was funny. I felt so alone and humiliated. I wanted to scream, to fight back, to tell Addison how terrible she was. But I couldn't. I was completely frozen with shock and disbelief. Suddenly Matthew yelled, "Addison, what are you saying?" His voice was shaken with anger and disbelief. But Addison just looked at him calmly and said, "It's the truth, Matthew. You know I always tell the truth." Then she turned away and went back to talking to her friends like nothing had happened. Matthew was stunned. He couldn't believe that his wife, the woman he thought he loved, could be so cruel. He stood there, looking confused and heartbroken. I couldn't take it anymore. I was furious. I felt like I was going to burst from trying to hold in my anger. And then I did something I wish I hadn't. I stood up, my hands shaking. "I have something to say," I announced. My voice was trembling with rage. "Addison is right. She's the one who's having our parents' first grandchild. So I have a gift for you." The silence in the room was deafening. Everyone was staring at me, waiting to see what I would do next. Their eyes were filled with a mix of shock and fear. I handed Addison the gift and she opened it. It was a mug that said, "Best dad ever." She said it was a nice gift, but I took it back. I turned to Matthew and said, "This gift is for the baby's real father, because it's not you. The baby isn't yours." Then I took the phone out of my pocket. It had the recording of Addison's phone call with Brody. I held it up and showed it to everyone. Now everyone would know the truth about Addison's lies. Everyone was shocked. People started yelling and arguing, and Addison tried to deny it, but it was too late. Everyone knew she had been lying. Suddenly, Matthew yelled, "I knew it! I knew something was going on with you and Brody, but I didn't know how bad it was." He was furious and heartbroken. Addison tried to defend herself, but no one believed her. The truth was out, and there was no one denying it. Her friends were stunned. I'm sure they never expected her to do something like this. Her lies shattered her relationships with her fiancé, her family, and her friends, all in one terrible afternoon. Everyone was staring at Addison, waiting for her to admit what she had done. Her face was white, and you could see the fear in her eyes. She knew her lies were over. Matthew was still yelling, and wouldn't listen when Addison insisted that the baby was his. "It's a misunderstanding," she cried. "Yes, I cheated, but the baby is yours, I swear." But no one believed her. She had tried to ruin my life, and now everyone knew the kind of person she really was. It was too late to apologize. The truth was out, and everyone knew Addison's secret. I turned to Matthew. I felt so bad for him, but I knew he deserved to know the truth. In a shaky voice, I said, "I'm so sorry." I watched the color drain from Matthew's face. He looked at Addison with disgust. His love for her had turned to anger and heartbreak. Everyone was so angry at Addison that they stormed out of her house. My mom took my hand, and I could feel how worried she was about me. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. I shook my head. The whole situation was still making me so angry. "But Mom, you heard what Addison said about me," I cried. I couldn't just let her get away with it. She was so mean and heartless. Mom sighed. I could tell she knew I was upset, but she didn't agree with what I had done. "Honey, I know you're hurt, but Addison is pregnant," she said gently. "Pregnant women sometimes say and do mean things they don't really mean." I scowled, but that doesn't make it okay. Addison knew what she was saying. She was trying to hurt me, and she did. Mom looked at me with sympathy in her eyes. "I know, sweetheart, but think about Matthew," she said softly. "Do you think it was right to embarrass him in front of everyone?" That's when I started to feel bad. I hadn't really thought about how exposing Addison would hurt Matthew. He had done nothing wrong, and now his life was ruined. He was probably devastated to find out his fiancée had cheated and the baby wasn't his. Suddenly, I felt sick with guilt. I never meant to hurt Matthew, but at the same time, I couldn't stand the thought of Addison getting away with her lies. I didn't consider how Matthew would feel about me exposing their relationship like that in public. I feel like I messed up, and I should have handled this situation better. Am I the a-hole for doing this and exposing my sister's truth in public? It had been a week since the horrible baby shower, and I couldn't stop thinking about what happened. Life had calmed down a bit, but everyone was still really upset. I felt awful that I had caused so much pain. I especially felt bad for Matthew. He didn't deserve to be treated like this. I know he was heartbroken to lose the woman he loved and the baby he thought was his. And on top of that, I humiliated him in front of everyone. I regretted what I had done at the baby shower, but at the same time, I couldn't understand why everyone was so mad at me. Addison was the one who did something wrong. She was the one who had lied and cheated. Yet, it still felt like I was the bad guy. A few days later, a friend called and told me what had happened with Matthew and Addison. I was shocked. Turns out, Matthew had known something was wrong for a long time. He suspected that Addison was cheating, and it turned out he was right. She had started having an affair with Brody, the guy from work, shortly after their wedding. Matthew knew about Addison and Brody, but he'd hoped the baby was his. He wanted them to be a family and was willing to forgive her for the affair. But after I exposed the truth, he forced Addison to admit the baby wasn't his. That must have been heartbreaking. I thought I had done the right thing by telling Matthew the truth, but now I wasn't so sure. He was devastated. He had lost the woman he loved, the baby he thought was his, and his dignity. It didn't take long for Addison's lies to fall apart. Matthew confronted her, and she confessed that the baby wasn't his. A paternity test proved her confession was true, and their marriage was over. Matthew was shattered. He told Addison he was leaving her and wanted a divorce. He said he couldn't be married to someone who was so dishonest. I felt terrible for Matthew. He had been completely betrayed by the person he loved the most. He must have been feeling a mix of sadness, anger, and humiliation. And on top of all that, he now had to figure out how to move on and rebuild his life. I wondered if Addison felt any remorse for what she had done. She had destroyed a good man's life with her cruel lies. Matthew deserved so much better. About a month later since I made the last update, I got a call that Addison was going into labor. I knew her baby was due soon, but I didn't expect it to happen so suddenly. Even though we weren't speaking, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. She's still my sister, and part of me was happy that she was finally having her baby. But then I remembered what she had done to me and Matthew, and that made me angry and sad. My mom told me that Addison was really mad at me. She blamed me for ruining her life and said she never wanted to see me again. I couldn't believe it. She was the one who had lied and cheated. I was the one who got hurt, but somehow, she made it seem like everything was my fault. I wanted to go on to the hospital and be there for her, but I knew she wouldn't want me there. The whole situation just made me feel terrible. Even though we weren't getting along, I still loved her. My first thought was that I wanted to go to the hospital and wait for the baby to be born. But then, I remembered how angry she was with me, and that made me feel really sad. My mom said that Addison blamed me for everything. The breakup with Matthew, the lies, and everything else. She didn't want me anywhere near her or the baby. Even though she was wrong to blame me, I sort of understood why she felt that way. I had hurt her, even though I didn't mean to. The whole situation was really difficult. I wanted to be there for my sister, but I knew she didn't want that. I decided the best thing was to give her space and respect her wishes. Hopefully someday she'll forgive me and we can have a relationship again. My mom told me that after Matthew left, Addison started dating Brody openly. I couldn't believe it. She had completely destroyed her life, and now she was acting like nothing had happened. I was disgusted to think of her and Brody together. He was the reason her marriage with Matthew fell apart. Addison and Brody didn't even try to keep their relationship a secret. She quickly moved out of the apartment she had shared with Matthew and started living with Brody. It hurt to see Addison move on so quickly and easily from her marriage, but I also knew there was nothing I could do to change things. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. Despite the lingering hurt, I decided to let it go. There was no point dwelling on the past. A few days ago, I got a call. I couldn't believe it when I heard the news. Addison and Matthew were officially divorced, and just a week later, Addison and Brody got married. They had a small wedding at their house. I was shocked that Addison had moved on so quickly, and it hurt that she hadn't forgiven me. I knew it would have been awkward to go to the wedding. It probably would have just started a big argument, and even though I wished things were different, I also knew that I wasn't the one getting married. It was Addison's special day, and it was up to her to choose who she wanted there. I wasn't surprised that Addison and Brody got married at home. They didn't want to deal with the drama of a big wedding, and they knew I probably wouldn't come anyway. While they were saying their vows, I was trying to put the whole situation out of my mind. I was still hurt and angry, but I also knew that Addison and Brody were happy together. It wasn't like I could change their minds or make them want to be with other people. A few days after Addison and Brody's wedding, I ran into Matthew at a restaurant. Seeing him was awkward. I felt bad about everything that had happened. I couldn't imagine how painful it must have been to find out about Addison's lies and betrayal. At first, we just made small talk, but eventually, we started talking about what had happened. He thanked me for telling him the truth. He said that even though it was hard to hear, he'd rather know Addison had cheated on him than continue living a lie. Hearing Matthew say that made me feel a little better. I was glad I did the right thing, even though it caused a lot of pain. When we said goodbye, it still felt weird between us, but I was relieved that Matthew wasn't mad at me anymore and that we were able to talk. I hope that someday we could be friends again. And that was a wrap up for today's story. Thank you very much for listening. Smash that like button for me and subscribe for more stories. Thanks again, and we'll be seeing you in the next one.